putting salt on the McGriddle, that's I don't know. First, what are we doing eating McGriddles? It's 2021, so I want to start there. Jane Slater joins the show, NFL Network. We saw her on Hard Knocks briefly. We'll get to her short cameo in a second. Do you put salt on your McGriddles, Jane?
It's so California elitist of you to say who eats McGriddles these days.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, we don't know where it came from. It's GMO or whatever. In Texas, we pretty much eat everything processed. I love salt. That's going to be my downfall at one point. So I felt a kindred spirit to Jerry in that scene, and particularly all the F-bombs. I really have to watch myself. Even my own family, when I'm at home, they always say to me, how do you use that word so frequently and not say it on air? And I just say, one day it's going to slip me up.
A reminder, Jane, the Rich Eisen Show, a family show here on Peacock,
Yes.
Westwood One, and SiriusXM. What's it like for you to see your Cowboys family now on TV for the whole world to see? You've been around this team for so long. Now we get to see these guys wrapping presents for each other. We get to see them catching punts. We get to see them in the locker room. It just gets the whole world gets a look in to the Dallas Cowboys, a team you've covered for a long time.
Well, I had a few takeaways. And to your point, of course, I've watched Hard Knocks over the years, but it does hit a little bit closer to home when, the cameras are in front of you every day and they're shooting this, but you've also gotten to know a lot of these guys off the field. I love that they started with Dak Prescott. Because I think fans got to see authentically who he is. In fact, there's a person working on a piece on Dak Prescott, and they reached out to me and they said, just for perspective, is Dak really as likable as everybody says he is? And I said, that's the crazy thing about him. I've covered plenty of quarterbacks over the years, and I think they get battle scars from dealing with the media. They sort of clam up. They start to distrust people. Their circles get smaller. Dak's not that guy. I mean, when I go and do events with him, or whether it be at the football fields or when I see him out at dinner or in public in Dallas, what you see is what you get. And I think that's what endeared him so quickly to that locker room in 2016 and why it was so easy for Jerry to hand the keys to the franchise to him over a guy that vacationed with the Jones family in the offseason. So I appreciated that. And then I also feel like a lot of people just refuse to give Ezekiel Elliott credit for personal growth and getting older and wiser. I'm glad I'm not judged on a lot of the mistakes that I made when I was 20, 21, and I'm glad there wasn't cell phone videos back then, quite frankly. And so when I see his maturation over the years and his playfulness and what he's like away from the cameras because of so much that he had to deal with early on in his career as it related to the media and scrutiny and everyone's observations, and you can say what you will about all of that, but he is a very likable guy. His teammates absolutely love him, and Dak and him truly do have this special bond. One has the 2-1 as his jersey number 21, the other is 4, and then the area code of Dallas is 214. So it's always been this really, and they're polar opposites. These two guys have completely different personalities, and they're sort of an unlikely couple, but it is just such an authentic and pure friendship and relationship. And then, like I said, Micah Parsons is one of these guys who you never know what to make of the hype train especially with the Cowboys. Like, it's really hard not to drink the Kool-Aid sometimes because of the PR machine that is Dallas. But Micah Parsons consistently makes plays on the football field. And there was all of that stuff at Penn State. I talked to a number of teams that just felt there was a little too much there for them. And I pressed him on that, his introductory press conference. And he said, look, that's behind him. There was an investigation into some of the things that were related to, I would call it hazing on campus, so to speak. And he was ready to move forward. And since then, he really has just shown up and shown out for this team every day in practice. He was only in for 2 series in the Pittsburgh game and had the fumble recovery and I think 3 tackles. And then you saw on the show, he just kept wanting to play. He just reminds me of, I don't know if you have siblings, guys, but I have a younger sister. She's 6 years younger. And growing up, she always wanted to play with me and my friends. So she'd always come knock on the door and we'd slam the door. You can't play with us. That kind of feels like Micah sometimes at practice. Like, he's just so eager to hang out with the veterans and be a part of the group. I just wonder how that acclimation going to take place. But I think when you're making plays and you're helping the defense win that side of the ball, I think it's going to be very easy for him to do that.
Co-host of the Boys and Girl podcast for Fox Sports Radio, Jane Slater joins the show. Jane, yesterday when Messi was announced for PSG, the PSG account on Instagram went up by 20 million followers. Did your follower count go up from your cameo on Hard Knocks last night?
I think someone said my head looked like a Twinkie because all you saw was like blonde hair, and it was like, this kind of cone shape, and it was taking up a third of the screen. I was disappointed. I did get it an IMDb credit, so Jane's head will get, its own page. But I was disappointed. I asked some of those questions and, at least give me a producer credit, Hard Knocks. I'm putting a lot of effort into looking my TV best out there, and can't even get a look out there. It's tough out in these streets.
Hey, Jane, it's Brockman. You mentioned Dak Prescott to start the episode. I mean, kind of a jarring image of that scar to begin last night. But how about the revelation of the second surgery? Was that really known among the Cowboys insiders?
Yes. I had learned about a second surgery about January, and this surgery took place towards the end of December. Now, there were different ways that it was characterized back then. We were told that it was a second surgery, that he pushed himself so hard in rehab that he hurt himself, and then others reported it as a cleanup surgery. And so, it was hard to understand what that surgery was, but we knew there was a second surgery. Tom Pelissero and Ian Rappaport ended up reporting that, I think it was in February or March, after, we had all sort of collectively done some digging on this. And then there was a Dallas radio station in town, 105.3 The Fan, that really went hard on this. So there were people talking about it, but I don't think he ever openly admitted to the second surgery or the extent of that surgery back then. So it's hard to say what it was, but if it was just a cleanup surgery, then why did he feel the need to bring it up? I thought that was interesting.
Right. And what about the lat issue, the shoulder? How's that working itself out right now?
I thought it was interesting. So walking you back through that day, we saw exactly what the Hard Knock cameras were seeing. He came out to practice the day before. I mean, he was a gunslinger out there, and a lot of us were shocked that even the ankle wasn't heavily taped, and he didn't seem like he had any limitations. But, I mean, he was just, you saw it. Just throwing that ball with, a lot of force. And so I don't know if he strained it. In that way, he hasn't really said how this muscle strain came to be. But he walked off the field. It was like sort of this innocuous injury. Nothing. He wasn't hit. It wasn't like he pulled up all of a sudden and, screamed in pain. And then we just see him walking off with the training staff. And the local TV reporters were supposed to do an interview with him at 2 that day, kept getting delayed. And then there was going to be a statement. And I was sitting there going, well, if it's just a strain, why do we need a statement?
Right.
So we had a former player out there, and I said, just out of curiosity, would you guys take somebody into town for like an MRI or something if there was like concerns? And they said, absolutely. And so sure enough, around 5:30, we get this press release that says there's this latissimus muscle strain. And we're not worried about it. We're just going to be careful with it. But then we hadn't seen him throw in like a week and a half. So I didn't know what to make of it. And then there was a revelation from Jay Glazer that we heard last night. He said they consulted with the Texas Rangers baseball staff on it. And then we hear it was also the Yankees. So there was clearly even more concern about this thing. Yeah. So then when I reached out to some people within the baseball community, they said, well, this is something that could be as dramatic as season ending, or it's a cortisone shot. So I kind of stayed away from it because it's sort of all over the place.
Yeah, you could even see the confusion last night on the episode. Just like nobody really knew what was going on. Like Jerry Jones just bothering the medical staff. Like, really weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I would say for Cowboy fans that have to give them a moment of relief, Dak Prescott was out there yesterday throwing the ball 20, 15 yards to Amari Cooper off to the side. He's just one of those players. And if I had to guess, that second surgery and this are two examples of Dak wanting to be so great and get back on the field with his teammates that I think you have to save him from himself sometimes. In other words, hey, Dak, don't push it. Don't rush it. And even as Dak and Kellen Moore said, or Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore said, because we had the Hall of Fame game, we had the benefit of 4 preseason games. They got out here early. This was a team that was full participation in minicamp and OTAs. So they've gotten a lot done. I think the one thing that's probably lacking at this point is continuity, because we've seen Tyron Smith out with elbow tendonitis. Amari Cooper just got activated off the PUP list. And, of course, now you've got Dak Prescott. But I don't get the sense they're overly worried. And just the thing I keep going back to is even after all that happens, the first day of padded practice, he came out to the practice field and still did those interviews with all the local media at 6 p.m. that night. And for a guy that spent an entire offseason dealing with a brutal season-ending injury to come back from that and then to have a quote-unquote setback with his arm, if it was going to be serious or a true setback, I don't think he would have come out there and done all those interviews, been at practice. You know, the next days when he had the cake to his face, like he's been in the best of spirits, and he's gone through full bore in all of the workouts using that lower body and throwing just kind of with the left hand gingerly as he gets it back to the training staff. So just based on what I've seen with my eyes and what I'm being told, it doesn't feel like this is a major setback. So that's all I know and all I can say based on just what I've seen and heard.
At Slater NFL on Twitter, Jane Slater, NFL Network joins the show. And Jane, as you know, the Cowboys are probably the most polarizing franchise in all of sports. You're either a diehard or you hate them with a passion, it seems. Nobody seems to be indifferent to the Dallas Cowboys. But I have to be honest with you, Jane, getting to know TJ Jefferson over these last few weeks, filling in for Rich on the Rich Eisen Show, there's part of my heart that is rooting for the Dallas Cowboys. The Super Bowl's about a 9-iron from the Rich Eisen Show studios. Can you imagine TJ Jefferson in Los Angeles Super Bowl week with the Cowboys in the big game? Is there a feeling of just like specialness around this group? Is this a special group, you think? Do you think TJ has real plans for Super Bowl celebration here in Los Angeles?
I think there's real talent on this roster, but to be fair, there's been talent on this roster in years past. The problem with the Cowboys is putting it all together. And whether that be coaching, whether that be injuries, they haven't been able to put it all together. And I've been shocked to see even Jerry Jones take a more tempered approach to the season. Mike McCarthy saying, last night, let me paraphrase because of all the F-bombs, that essentially they're not there for a winning season. They're not there for the playoffs. They were for the Super Bowl. That's the most deliberate I've heard them talk about this season. I think it's implied. That's why Jerry made the change with Mike McCarthy, a guy who has skins on the wall. That's why they went all in on defense. They said goodbye to a lot of guys that were free agents, spent 8 of their 11 draft picks on defense. And then just how emotional Jerry's been as of late. He's an emotional guy. He pulls you in when he talks about his passion for football and specifically for this team. But it does feel different this year. And I've said that in the past, but I mean, you saw when he's getting really emotional talking about he could be anywhere in the world, but he chooses to be at training camp. Think about anything that you've loved and anything that you've put your heart and soul into, and then just to have it come up flat every year, I would imagine that's frustrating. And I know a lot of people say, well, if you're willing to do anything to get to a Super Bowl, why don't you just name a GM? It seems like that's very uniquely Dallas these days. I mean, Mark Cuban's doing that now with the Dallas Mavericks. So I understand the need to cut out the middleman, and a lot of people don't realize Will McClay and his staff do a lot of the work, but obviously Jerry signs off on all of it. And I'm always very impressed with how well Jerry knows this team. I mean, this is a guy that can literally go down the list and tell you everything you need to know about players. I've interviewed several coaches who just know guys by numbers, but he knows the intricacies of all players. So for the knock on that, I understand, but just covering this team, I truly believe this team wants to win, but I think given how ugly last season got and all the optimism when CeeDee Lamb fell to you and it felt like you were getting all these free agents coming to Dallas because Mike McCarthy and it was disasters, I think everyone's just being tempered, and maybe that's a good thing for Dallas finally.
Jane Slater joins the show, NFL Network. Ben Lyons in for Rich on the Rich Eisen Show.
Hey, Jane, what up? It's TJ. How you doing?
What's up, my man?
I'm chilling. So I've got a question. I know you've got a lot of good friends, and you like to do nice stuff for your friends, whether it be, Julie Sessions or Colleen Wolfe or MJ Acosta.
You give love to my friends.
Of course.
That's my man.
Of course. Now, here's the question, though. I know you love them, but do you love them enough to do what Zeke did for Dak and give him like a Goyard bag rolling suitcase that costs, I don't know, I'd say a substantial amount of change? I mean, are you that close with someone that you'd spend that kind of coin on a gift? Does Colleen Wolfe get that on her upcoming birthday? That's all I'm asking.
It's a great question, and I feel like my social media persona is not in alignment with what my actual bank account is sometimes. I know that Ben Lyons used to roll in those fancy New York circles and the Vogue circles, but I actually didn't even know what that bag is. Plug out to iFly. It's a bag you can get at Walmart. It's a hard shell. It's $100, and I fought with some friends who had the Toomey bags. I'm like, it's just a suitcase. But to your point, I was thinking the same thing and almost put a poll out on Twitter last night. So I like to see that you and I are always thinking that content is king here. I don't think I've ever spent more than maybe $100 on a dinner for a friend. We've got this friend group in Dallas, and it's fairly obnoxious, and I refuse to participate. It's like 20 girls that I don't even know, most of them, on this group text. And every girl's birthday, it's everyone pitching $100 to buy someone a fancy bag. I don't have half the fancy bags that these girls have. In fact, there was a Sex and the City episode where Sarah Jessica Parker ended up sending, she registered for shoes because she kept buying all of her friends baby shower gifts and wedding gifts. And she was like, I just want shoes after all of this investment. So long story short, I can't imagine. I think somebody sent me a link to this. It's a $13,500 bag.
It's really expensive.
Wow.
So I have got two thoughts on that, too. These days, there's a lot of sponsorship. So remember when he got the offensive line, all those John Deere, they were like Razor tractors that they could ride?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure he had a hookup there. And I've got to imagine that Goyard, or whatever this bag is, got quite a bit of publicity from doing this, so maybe he got a discount. He does have a very good agent in Rocky Arsenault. I wouldn't put it past him.
Jane Slater joining the show, pretending not to know anything about Goyard bags. Ben Lyons in for Rich on the Rich Eisen Show. Jane, I saw your social media. I saw @Slater NFL on Twitter. You mentioned it. And I saw you got a bone to pick with this show. What's the beef?
I'm disappointed, guys. And sometimes, and I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to defend yourselves, because sometimes social media is like phone and stories get twisted and manipulated. But I was disappointed to hear and read that you guys thought that I wouldn't survive Survivor. That I'd be voted off the island.
Who said that?
Why is that?
Well, first of all, Jane, I don't know if on the island of NFL reporters who have to live off the land to survive, I don't know if that's your natural environment. They don't have $200 flaming desserts that come on fire on Instagram.
I am not that bougie.
So for Sal Palantonio, somebody who's, had to survive off the rest stops on the I-95 for 30 years.
Let's talk about Sal when you go on a shoot with him.
I'm going to go with Sal, pal. I got to be honest,
I feel
Jane.
like we need to phone a friend and call my bestie, Diana Rossini, to talk about this. Rossini and I are like cockroaches. I mean, I survived last year here in Dallas, and I didn't know if the Cowboys were going to let me come back after all the problems I caused about defense. So if I can survive Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, I think I can survive being on an island of folks. I also grew up in a family, contrary to popular belief on social media this offseason, we were in pop-up tents. So like my whole growing up, we did a lot of camping. I was a Girl Scout.
So what is your specialty? Are you going for the fish? Are you cooking the rice? Are you building the hut? Like, what would be your niche on Survivor?
All the things. I'm incredibly resourceful.
Oh.
I also am a huge fan of dystopian dramas and end of the world. So everything from The Walking Dead to you name it, I've watched it and I've prepared for all of these potential scenarios.
Well, Janie, then as a fan of the show, then you don't want to be too strong, because then you're a target.
Well, that's why I am going down the Elizabeth Hasselbeck track. She looks petite and blonde and cute, and everyone said she's not going to make it. It's all in the mind, guys. all in the mind.
Jane Slater climbing up the power rankings here on the Rich Eisen Show of
might be the
NFL
one
reporters
seed now.
surviving in the wild. Don't know if Diana Rossini can skin a squirrel to make it through the night. We appreciate you taking some time, Jane.
Hey, Ben, also, if Jane survived that Metairie heat in that tweet that she sent us about
true.
the
What
swamp,
was that?
but if you and almost shut Twitter down, if you could survive that, Jane,
Yeah, it was hot
then
out there,
I'm thinking
huh?
maybe you could survive.
I told you guys, it's hard out here in these streets.
I remember
You guys are the best.
I remember getting this tweet and was just like, I have no idea why
were
we
like,
got this,
wait,
but I'm
what?
so happy.
No, she's already training for our Survivor series
We
with
need to make
NFL
this
reporters.
happen.
We appreciate the dedication, Jane. Climbing the power rankings. Thanks for checking in.
Bye, guys. Always good talking to you.
Jane
All right, Jane.
Slater, NFL Network, giving us great stuff on the Cowboys.
All right, so Jane's climbing the list.
Power rankings. How is Sal Palantonio right at the top? That guy's been surviving off rest stops and snacks on the I-95 for years.
I thought we agreed that Florio was from West Virginia, so
Yeah,
he may have
Florio up
skinned
there.
us.
Florio's a sleeper.
Jane Slater, no, not afraid of the humidity from that tweet. Like, I got so excited talking to her about NFL Survivor. I forgot to get that nugget about the Saints from her. She had like something on the
Get a
Saints.
Saints nugget. That's all right.
Saints nugget, but
Let's call her
she had a
back.
bone to pick with us. At Slater NFL on Twitter, coming in hot.
I don't
Angry.
remember anyone saying that she wouldn't
Yeah,
do well.
were we disparaging Jane? I don't
remember
I
remember
don't
that.
know. I don't know if Albert Breer said that she couldn't build a fort, but she was
By the
upset.
way, I mean, I love Albert, but he's the first.
Yeah, no, he's more of a glamper. I
Yeah,
can tell.
he's first voted.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.